the Bad Art Show. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Jenna Sparrow, and I have with me today the lovely and very excited to be here, Monarey Martinez.
That's right.
Yeah, we have a very fun topic. I was actually not going to do this topic as quickly, but then I was like, Monarey is going to really like this, so we should definitely do this one. Today, we are going to be discussing the art and life of Austin Osman Spare. So,
and are they going to see these pictures? Because I want them to see that he's hot too.
Yes, they will.
Okay,
they will see these pictures. So I'm going to edit these pictures in and post. But first thing when we pull them up on the screen, Monterey is like, okay.
I was like, I like art. There we go. This man's hot. He's into the occult. It honestly looks like he's doing the pussy thing with his mouth in that second picture, doesn't it? Like where he's doing this.
It kind of does.
Just good at sex. I'm just guessing. Not that I care about that because I'm a prude, but yeah.
Pretty great, right? All right. Well, this is a young Austin Spare. You guys might know him because he kind of had a resurgence in the 1970s and then again sort of now as the famous artist and occultist, right? He's a fantastic artist. I actually think that a lot of his art is kind of undermined by his experience in the occult because he is the favorite artist of every edgelord that has ever existed. Yeah, and you'll see why as we get into this. And I think that detracts a little bit from how great he really is.
Right.
But at the same time, if you love him for whatever reason, that's great.
Yeah.
You know?
So is he like, question. In the art world, like, are there people like how we know comics? Like, if you just say names, like, do a bunch of people just know so many artists like that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like everyone has the particular types of art that they're really, really into.
Yeah.
So whether or not you're a scholar or an art historian, even if you're just someone who just likes art, a lot of people are independently researched on what artists they like, or at least what genres, what artists exist inside of that.
Got it.
So if you're kind of a witchy occult type person, you probably already know who he is. A lot of people don't know who he is, which is fascinating because as we get into his story, many more people should.
Man.
So one thing about him I'm going to say before we start the story is he is considered very self-mythologizing. And by that, I mean, like, there's going to be stories that I tell about him that may or may not be real.
He's a pathological liar.
Yeah.
That's why he's
known
hot.
for the white lies.
Got it.
Never any lies that hurt anyone. I will say that.
Doesn't he kind of look like James Franco a little bit?
Oh my God, he does. He's hotter than James Franco.
Yeah.
Though, right?
And
it's like a hotter James Franco.
Yeah, he's like a hotter James Franco. I'm wondering if James Franco is him reincarnated.
Oh, I'm so happy she just said that, and you're going to see why. All right.
Okay.
Austin Spare was born in London in 1886. He is technically what they considered Cockney, which is a specific part of like the main part of London. And it's also where they have that really terrible accent.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if anyone listening is from London and they think that's a beautiful accent. It's not. And it's not. I'm going to be the first one to say it. And I'm mostly British, so I feel entitled to say that.
That's right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He was raised high Anglo-Catholic. So that's kind of a weird one. You don't think about that much when you think about like Protestant type of Christian, but they're really into like the ceremony and the incense burning and the robes.
Right.
Kind of like Catholic, which is witchcraft.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what like a lot of people like in South America, like the type of like Catholicism they practice. It's like very like ritual based where they pray to like certain saints and they have like their herbs and their oils. And you're like, you do your thing, but I know you a bruja. Okay? I know you're a witch.
You are a witch. Just because you're wearing a cross does not mean you aren't a witch. You are a witch.
You're a witch. Yeah.
I see you making spells.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a weird upbringing if you're coming up in London, I think. Not weird, but it's, it definitely informed his later life. Also, he was working class, so he's not like an aristocrat. His father was actually a police officer in London and also a huge supporter of his art, which I feel like at this time, I mean, the idea of having like a policeman father that's kind of like a working class man, you would think that he wouldn't be into having a son as an artist.
Right.
Absolutely not the case. His father was one of his biggest supporters.
And maybe his dad liked black people too. It was just a little different.
I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
I think we're rewriting history right now, and I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
He's a different kind of police officer, this man.
He did notoriously have a difficult relationship with his mother, and all the stuff that I read on that didn't go into it too much, but I think it comes into play later on with how he deals with women a little bit. You know, guys with mommy issues.
I keep getting in relationships with them. That's why I thought he was hot. Oh my God, it's making so much sense.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
You just can't help it. They have mommy issues. You don't see it, but then in hindsight, that's why that you were even in a relationship with them.
That's right.
So he's one of those for sure. I do want to give a shout out actually really quick to the author of this book. This is one of the main sources. Phil Baker wrote an incredible book on Austin Spare. So if anyone wants to buy this is much more informative than what we're about to do.
And did you read that whole book just for this episode?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's got big words in it.
Damn.
But it's not really that intense. But I don't want to scare people off. Get the book. It's great. I also brought some books on witchcraft as well, which that bottom one I'm only like halfway through. You can see my marker on it. But the bottom one is kind of the background of esoteric magic, and the top one is chaos magic, which we're going to get a lot into in this episode. Yes.
Yeah.
So his dad supports his artwork. He's from London. He drops out of school at 13, and he is a child prodigy in art. He starts working in like a print shop and then a glass making shop around this time.
Damn.
So I don't think they had child labor laws back then, apparently.
Yeah, they're just like, just do it. Okay.
But he was kind of getting a name for himself around London as being this child prodigy and a really skilled draftsman. They always say that. And
What's a draftsman?
Draftsman just would be really good with like a pencil and drawing, technical drawing skills is the way I would describe that. So like I could look at you and just draw a portrait of you. I would be a strong draftsman.
Damn. Okay.
By that sense. So
are you a draftsman?
What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Am I a draftsman?
I think so.
I
know her boobs.
This is actually not in my. I do have to say, this is actually not in my style of art. I tried to like meld my style with Botticelli's in order to make this look like the original sort of.
Got it.
That's why it took me so damn long, because that's not my style.
Yeah, I think you fucking killed it, and I think you did a great job of drawing yourself.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. So Austin, very skilled draftsman. He works at a stained glass window store called Powell in London. And this is during the time of the arts and crafts movement.
Okay.
So what the arts and crafts movement is kind of a return to traditional techniques and making, not using tools.
Got it.
So this is a time when printmaking is really big, things like that. So the arts and craft movement was pushing back towards like utilitarian objects like vases,
got it,
furniture, things like that. So they were kind of being like, people should be craftsmen.
Got it. And like women were going through divorces. So they were like, now all of a sudden they're making some shit. I'm assuming probably not. But...
It does seem like a middle-aged man thing to do, is like build a desk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're like, all right, let's just focus on some things. You know?
Really get in there with your hands.
Yeah.
I will say I'm this type of an artist, though. I'm a very like process oriented, like building things and making things with my hands.
Yeah, because you do that with like, I feel like some of your furniture in your house, like you've like painted or like made, you know, I was like, you know what you do.
Yeah. And I like carving and things like that too.
Yeah.
So I guess I associate with this tradition in art more than many other traditions.
Yeah.
And it also perfectly goes along with the Art Nouveau movement. So while this is going on in fine art, the arts and craft movement is going on like in people's basements. They're building stuff.
And what's fine art? Fine art is painting?
Fine art's well, no, it's kind of a looser term than that. Fine art, it would be like things that you buy in a gallery. I'll describe it like that. So the way that people would describe fine arts, the traditional way would be painting and sculpture.
Got it.
Things like that. Ceramic work, you know, those would all be considered fine art.
Okay.
There's obviously a billion different things that are art.
Right.
You know, there's performance art and there's
Yeah.
digital art, and there's all this everything, all these different things are art. But when you think of fine art, I'm really, really narrowing it by saying painting and sculpture. But
got it. So like,
I would say
ballet, like what is ballet consider? That's just like
it's
art
performance art.
Okay,
Yeah.
performance art.
Yeah, comedy's performance art.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, when people mostly talk about comedy, are they mostly talking about like physical, tangible objects? Like when they're like fine art, it never means performance art.
See, that it's back in the day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
At this time, fine art would not have meant performance art because that would have been like opera or playwright or something like
Got
that.
it.
Nowadays, in the postmodern and contemporary era, there's a lot more wishy-washy about what is fine art. And
Got it.
Museums, especially contemporary museums, will finance or sponsor a performance piece to happen like in the gallery or something. But that's much more of a postmodern idea.
Got it. Who's that chick? Something Bramovich or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what is that? That's performance art? Or is
Yeah,
that...
she's performance art as well as
You're like a bitch. And I'm kidding.
no, what's the word I'm looking for? Not protest, but you know what I mean? Well, she's doing like social commentary art. She's doing performance art. She's doing installation art. She's doing I'm trying to think of the word.
Yeah, I know what we're doing
because it's not protest.
Yeah, but it's something with like a P or something with like
activism art.
Activism, yeah.
That was going to take me a minute. Okay, sorry, I just made that loud noise into the microphone because it came to me.
Yeah.
She's like an art activist.
Got it.
Which I have a lot to say about that. But all artists are activists in their own way. But if that's the only thing you can stand on is your activism.
Right.
That's why I say I associate with the arts and crafts movement.
Got it.
Because I'm perfectly fine with whatever you want to express.
Yeah.
But
let's have some art in it.
Let's have some foundation of artistic expression.
Now I'm getting in the art world.
You know?
Okay,
are you getting what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you're saying like there's never any real art. There's no tangible. There's no painting. There's no sculpting.
She's not the height of what I would say is the type of people who do art that like is completely removed from art.
Right.
I just think if you're gonna be an artist and do those sort of things, also put a little art in it,
right?
You know, which she does. She puts a little art in it.
It's like a comic that had no jokes, but they're on stage, and they're like, "And this is wrong, and this is wrong," and you're like, "Okay, but we still need jokes."
Yeah, we still need some meat. Of what the actual essence of art is. That's actually a very good analogy for that. When you see someone getting by on stage on just their charisma, but then you realize halfway through that the reason you're not laughing is because they haven't actually said any jokes.
Yeah,
that's the best way that I feel about art activism.
Got it.
And there are some people who do it great.
Yeah.
And they have this charisma that's undeniable, you know, in the comedy world as well. There are some people who do it great.
For sure.
Who don't write a single fucking joke.
Yeah.
And then there's other people.
Bet you can't draw no flowers, bitch. Bet you can't. Let me see your watercolor work.
It is a perfect analogy. I appreciate you for that.
Here we go. Okay.
Thank
I'm learning.
you. So now you're getting into it. You're getting it. This is what's going on. So Art Nouveau is huge at the time. This is one of my favorite types of art, I would say, because it mixes so many different things. It's like design.
That's beautiful. Yeah, whatever that is on the left, it's so beautiful.
That's Muka. That's a great one. Very well-known artist. Yeah, it's a great time in art because it kind of does mix utilitarian form with decorative art.
Right.
Which is a really cool combination, I think. So it's like something you could use every day but make it beautiful. This has been the death in contemporary art, whether it be architecture or whatever it is, moving towards like really, really, you know, you see like a contemporary building.
Yeah.
It's the death of this style of art.
Right. Because you don't see none of this anymore.
Yeah. You don't see anything that's like beautiful. Right. You know, to where when you go to certain countries, specifically in parts of Europe, where you're like, oh, they really thought about how to make everything beautiful.
Right. Just even like the crown molding and just like shelves.
Casual
and like
shit that doesn't even need to be beautiful is beautiful, right? I do miss that a little bit.
Yeah. You know? You don't know. I don't know art, but like when I go into somewhere and I see that like it's like just like curated and I can tell that they like took their time with like the carpets and like I said, like even just like certain shelves, like how they're arched or windows, like the lengths of them or whatever. And you're like, oh, why is this so beautiful? Even like your house, like your apartment, where I was like, wait, why is it so beautiful in here? And I was like,
because they thought it through.
Yeah. And like even like your cups, like your like little like things, I was like in your robe.
Now she admits, now since we're on camera, she's been cosplaying as me every time she stares at
I was in your robe and with your glasses. Like, I'm Jenna Sparrow. I can paint too.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
I have a thing for collecting unusual things. I collect arts. I collect first edition of books, which I'll get into some of the publications in this. But I like to collect things that people took time on.
You could tell,
you
like
know?
your curtains, your just like everything. I was just like, this is vibes. This is vibes.
It's all from thrift stores.
Yeah, but it's great. Yeah, how you did it.
Thrift
it's really
store.
Good. Yeah,
100%.
Well, I love it.
Well, back to our boy Austin.
My boy. You have it.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's true. I have a man. It's Monarey's boy Austin. He gets when he's working at that glass shop, a couple of artists from the Royal Society of British Artists see him there.
Yeah.
And they're like, this kid's amazing. He's great. We have to recommend him to the Royal College of Art. So at 17, he gets into one of the top art schools in the world. I actually think at the time it was the top one. It might still be right now, although all college is actually kind of bullshit right now. Don't go.
Yeah.
But don't go. I hate to say that, although I'm sure there are great professors at this college. College in general is a scam.
Yeah.
But this one in particular, I mean, one of the top schools, he gets in and he's only 17 years old.
Damn.
At the time, he preferred drawing from life drawings, which I completely get.
Is that a drawing or a painting?
That's a photograph.
Oh, I was like, damn.
Of him painting.
Got it.
So he was at the school, and for some reason, I guess it was just their practice at the time that they often had people drawing from casts of models and still lives and mannequins, things like that. So he didn't really like going to school there because they didn't have live models for him.
Got it.
But at the time, he befriends Sylvia Pankhurst, who I think I'm going to have to do an entire episode on her. She is an art activist, but uses her art to do the activism.
Yeah.
She is a huge contender in the British suffragette movement. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but you know what that is, right?
Yeah.
Women's rights, women's voting. I just sound like an idiot. I know all these terms, but nothing about women.
Yeah, listen, I got big boobs. I don't really have to, if you know what I mean. I get my own way.
I get to vote, okay?
Men do what I say. You understand? You understand.
My vote matters double.
Yeah. Double D's. I'm sorry.
So
I was like, I'm sorry. I have small B cups, so anytime I get to reference her big boobs, I get very excited to do so.
It's perfect. She also, her parents were part of that movement too. I think her dad was a lawyer who was fighting for women's rights to vote.
Oh,
so she's very important. And she's a painter.
Yeah.
Her art's really cool. I'll do an episode of her at some
So they
point.
were banging, you think?
No, I don't think so. I think they were just friends. And I mean, I could be wrong, but I think they were just friends.
Ugly? No, I'm just kidding. He's like, get the models in, because I'm going to tell you what.
Look, she really believed women needed the right to vote. I don't
You tell me what that means.
Take that however the fuck you want. Okay. Anyways, he did not enjoy his time at the college.
Yeah.
He ended up just focusing on like his line work and his sketching the whole time, which I think they didn't like because they were more in the classical idea of like oil painting and shading. So yeah. Around this time, he has his first public exhibition, which is at the public library. And it's pretty well received. It does have a lot of magic in it. So he's only 17 at this time.
Yeah.
He's already all in on magic.
Hell yeah.
So this is a time period in London where the esoteric was like a certain group of people found it very, very interesting and high class. A lot of them were aristocrats. He finds the work of this woman, Madame Blavatsky, who we'll get into in a little bit. But he starts incorporating all of her magical teachings into his imagery.
Oh, cool.
At the same time, his father submits for him, because I think you had to be an adult to submit, 2 of his drawings into the Royal Academy's summer exhibition, which is like highly prestigious. We're talking the best artists in all of the world would live in London at this point, and Paris. But so he actually gets one of them accepted. And there's newspaper articles and clippings from this time talking about this child prodigy. Yeah. Because they accepted him into this exhibition. That's the piece on the right that they actually
This one,
put
the
in
argument?
There. Yeah. So I don't know if you can see what's going on in
the
that.
titties in the back?
Yeah. There's a lot going on. Yeah. And there's also, if you see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's some Egyptian god type of thing poking its head in. So he's weaving all of this different religious esoteric stuff into this. But people at the time just saw his work and compared him to Aubrey Beardsley, who was a famous British artist at the time.
Got it.
This is Beardsley's work. He is famous for a lot of things, but one of the main things is the Yellow Book, which is a publication that was put out around this time that featured the writer Oscar Wilde. And he did a lot of drawings for Oscar Wilde's writing.
Got it.
And they were very erotic in nature. I'll put it that way. Do you know who Oscar Wilde is?
I know of the name, but when I don't actually know who he is.
He's a funny looking fella, but he's like one of the first outspokenly gay authors. He's like a fantastic writer, and he was also a big part of that movement.
Got it.
Because at this time, being gay not only was like it a social problem, I think it might have also been illegal in London. I should have looked this up, but I think at the UK it was still illegal to be gay at this time.
Wow.
So these people were on the forefront of like the progressive movement,
right?
Of really being inclusive towards everyone. So
these are really cool too.
Aren't they amazing? Yeah, Beardsley's awesome. I actually want a copy of the Yellow Book. If I get any rich listeners who want to do something awesome, get me a first edition of the Yellow Book. I think it's 13 volumes of that. It's amazing. And it has a bunch of his original works in it. They're really cool.
That's cool.
Again, very decorative, attention to detail, really thinks about composition.
Totally. And it's like dreamy and
dreamy. So they're comparing him to Beardsley the whole time.
Okay.
But I was looking at his work throughout his life and doing this. And I actually think there's a lot of artists that he holds things in common with. And the ones that predate him that he holds things in common with are going to be Henry Fuseli, Francisco Goya, El Greco, and also William Blake. When it comes to like their working of the macabre and also religion and just esoteric stuff. I mean, they really have a lot in common. You'll see in all these images.
Are all these guys British too, or are they like all European, like all over?
They're all European, but no, they're not all British. He's Spanish. William Blake is British. The other ones are not. No, they're from all over the place. So this is the time that he's like super into Madame Blavatsky. Have you ever heard of Helena Blavatsky?
No.
Way to butcher that name.
I was like, I would have said baklava. I was like, I don't know.
Helena Baklava wrote this book called The Secret Doctrine, which is like an early occult teaching. She kind of gathered Eastern and Western religions and then wrote about them. She is also the person who came up with the term Aryan.
Oh.
So in her version of it, there was like Atlantis that went under, and the Aryans were this group of people that pre-existed the Great Flood.
Yeah.
I'm totally butchering this, but it's basically like so then Nazis took that idea. So this is the funny thing about the Aryan
always
thing.
do.
And they applied it to themselves because Aryan was just supposed to mean superior.
Right.
So they thought, oh, that must mean us.
Yeah. There's someone else.
So now people think Aryan and they think of like Nazis, which is not even what it originally was. And it also had nothing to do with being white, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that was all just like made up. Anyway, he gets super into her teachings, specifically her Kaya Yu, which is this idea of like the ultimate power, which would be like an ultimate God sort of thing, but not really the Christian God.
Right.
In the way that we think of it. Everything he's writing at this stage, he's doing a lot of writing and a lot of making art, but it's all like super goth.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can tell by the imagery, but it's
for sure.
It's a lot of like there's dragons and there's, these different creatures and all this different stuff.
It reminds me of a tarot deck. Don't these like pictures kind of look like?
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to it. Okay. He designs his own tarot deck. I'll show it to you.
Yeah, I was like this. I was like, my God. I was like, I feel like I've seen these pictures like on a deck or something.
So this is the other thing: is there's right hand path and left hand path in magic. Have you ever heard of those two things?
No.
So Blavatsky would be right hand path. The way she described it is right hand path is more along the lines of like traditions, and they have ceremonies and things like that. And left hand path, she called black magic.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of like light and like dark.
Light and dark magic. I kind of disagree with her on this, and my point being that they consider things that are less rigid to be dark magic or black magic, and chaos magic fits into that.
Yeah,
but I don't think that it's dark at all. I mean, if you're gonna think it's dark, it's all dark.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For sure.
I don't think there's good and bad. Totally. You're making it good and bad by putting that intention onto it.
Yeah.
So he makes a point to say that his work is not grotesque and it's not just for the sake of originality, but that it represents the inferno of Earth. And that is an idea in her teaching, the inferno on Earth. So he's directly pulling that for her.
Got it.
It's around this time that he publishes his first book, which is titled Earth Inferno, which is taken from her. And it's about the personal suffering in the world in which we live in is already hell.
Damn
So
right.
that's kind of like almost like a Hindu sort of belief of
Yeah.
looking at things like this, or I guess Buddhist too.
Yeah.
Like this in itself is hell.
Right.
And everything is like a trial. Everything is meant to make you
To
uncomfortable.
evolve so that we can like move on into like the higher consciousness.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah. Which have you ever studied Buddhism?
Like just I used to go to like Buddhist meetings when I first moved here.
Oh,
so
okay,
a lot of I lived in Orange County, and there was a big Buddhist center there, like SGI. And so it's like Sokagai. I'm not going to say it. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say SGI.
I've already butchered so many names.
Yeah. But at least they're like European names. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm an idiot. I can hardly read. So it's making this really difficult, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, I used to go to Buddhist. I liked a lot of the practices and stuff. And I like a lot of the teachings. But they were like very weird when I was like, well, I still believe in Jesus. And they're like, yeah. They're like, well, and I was like, no, I believe in Jesus.
Did you say my last name is Martinez?
Do you get it? Do you get it? But yeah, but I liked.
Can't cut out baby Jesus.
We're not going to do it. Not going to do it. But also I realized too that they were again, I'm not saying all Buddhists, I'm saying this SGI center, they were like, okay, like, and then you get your Gohonzon, that's like the little scroll that you chant to. And once you get your Gohonzon, like then you have to bring in 5 new members. And I was like, I feel like I'm destined for a cult at some point in my life. And I was like, as soon as you said new members, I don't want to do it.
That is a multi-level marketing scheme.
Yes.
Is what they call it.
Yes. And so
I'm
was
glad
just like,
the Buddhists have finally figured out how to do it too.
Yeah.
Because every other religion's already got
Yeah,
that
it's like,
on.
we beat you. You're slacking.
You're late to the game, Buddhist. I'm glad you're finally catching up with the rest of the world.
Seriously. Yeah. So I just stopped going. But yeah,
that's fair. Well, he's really into all these ideas, but he kind of mixes them all together. And it's around this time that he actually leaves the Royal College of Art, and he did not receive a degree. He dropped out of art school, which many great people have.
Right.
I actually am like ashamed that I graduated. I know that sounds bad, but
see, I'm the opposite. I didn't go to school, and I always have so much shame. And so like I was like, well, you give me your degree then. So.
I mean, it took me forever. I went to community college for 7 years. Again, I can't read.
We're all just trying our best, man.
So the next summer he exhibited again at the Royal Academy with the image on the right, which is the resurrection of, how do I say that? Zoroaster? I think you have to say it.
Yeah. Is my understanding of how it's pronounced.
Do it one more time.
Zoroaster.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, people thought child prodigy, this kid's killing it.
Yeah.
Right? Like these things are so unique and great. And right around this time also, or maybe just after this, he puts out a book. It's his second book called A Book of Satires. It is spelt incorrectly. And the reason why it's spelt incorrectly is because he thinks that it's the archaic way of spelling it. And this is going to be a theme throughout Chaos Magic as we get into this, is words have a lot of power behind them. And spelling them certain ways do too. Yeah. So his second book, the Book of Satires, focuses on the hypocrisy, the power, the materialism of Victorian culture. And it's got 9 total allegory images in it. So I'm going to show you a few of these. They have things to do with like the church and politics. So he's kind of calling like all this stuff bullshit. My favorite one is this one on the left. It's just called quackery. And it's a comment on Western medicine. Yeah. About how doctors think that medicine is the truth and, science is the truth, when in fact science is the idea of constantly questioning science and testing hypothesis. Totally. So that one's one of my favorite ones. And also the one on the right, which is fashion, which I love that one because it's just like grotesque in a way of like indulgence.
What would be your interpretation? So like the one on the left, like what would you say is like happening? So like with that man, is this the same person?
To me, it looks like there's people, I don't think it's the same person, but it could be. There's people sick and dying. Yeah. And there's people outside, they look weathered. And, he's showing here that here's all this medicine, but the skull that's on the table, which is kind of hard to see. But so that's like a memento mori is a thing in art where when you see skulls and images, it's usually like a foretelling of like death is to come and a reminder. Memento mori means a reminder that you're going to die. So like life is not infinite. You're going to be here and then you're going to be gone. So what you do here is very important. And to remember that and keep that in your head. That used to be a much bigger theme in art. That, you know, time is important, fleeting. Yeah.
And it kind of shows him like where the doctor looks as if he's like arrogant or something, where he's like, oh, like, look at this good thing I'm doing. But then it's like death like surrounding him.
Yeah. But the doctor does look very like the doctor
look what I just did.
Yeah, and the doctor also looks sick, and I think there's something to that. Yeah, you know, like the doctor himself is sick.
Totally. I mean, so many times when you go to the doctor, I'm like, these people are out of shape. They look bad. I'm like, if you don't look like you're in shape and you're healthy and you're happy, then no.
Yeah. If you're giving someone who isn't diabetic Ozempic,
stop. Yeah,
don't do that.
Agreed.
Well, these are his tarot cards.
Yes. Okay. I was like, no, this.
So he does a whole series of these. You can actually buy these tarot cards. There's a company that prints them and puts them out. So you can buy a whole set of them. But these are some images of them, and it's so as I mentioned, there's some weird things that you see repeated in his imagery. One of them is a vulture skull, and that's a symbol of death and flesh. And he applied it to represent what he called Kia, which is the consumer of religions. So Kia is going to be a theme throughout his work.
Is Kia like a person who consumes religion?
No, it's more like a ideology that consumes all religion, I guess would be a better way to put it. I think it's like the version of him that consumes all religion.
Right.
And then learns from it.
Yeah.
I kind of think that's what it is. So that's one version of it. He was very into psychology and things like that were kind of like new science forms at the time.
Yeah.
So he studied up on Freud and Jung as well.
Yeah.
And even though he has an image that he painted of Freud, he doesn't really seem to respect either of them. Oh, really? He refers to them as fraud and junk.
That's so funny.
He's
think petty. I like it.
Oh, he is petty. He's tweeting. He is Monarey's type. Now since I'm thinking about it, this guy is totally your type. Yeah. He also gets really, really into sigil magic at this time. So you could see some of the earlier images. There were some things in it that I would describe as sigil magic. But basically it's the idea of like the evangelical idea of a word having like a magical complex meaning behind it.
Right.
And he's right. Words do have magic. Repeating words have magic. That's why when I hear people use like buzzwords, and they use them over and over and over again. Yeah. Like for a while, I heard everyone saying the word monolith like a ton. And then I heard equity was a big one that we're repeating
because it gets lodged in your subconscious and then it becomes like behaviors that you're not even aware of that you're like doing or participating in for sure.
Absolutely. And when you repeat something like that someone else has assigned to you, and you might not even see it that way.
Right.
But you picked it up from someone who is more powerful than you in whatever social way that is.
Right.
And then you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and you're giving them power by repeating it.
Totally.
And this is something that Austin Spare was like acutely aware of, is that words have magic.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times he would write out sentences that have a magical meaning behind them. Maybe it's an intention or something like that. And then he would break those sentences down to less letters. And then those letters are jumbled. They don't mean anything, right? Yeah. And then you could take those letters, jumble them into a symbol. And then that symbol now has the meaning of that word.
Right.
And so when you write that symbol, it's like invoking that meaning of that sentence that you wrote.
Got it.
So that was kind of his approach to sigil magic. And then he created his own alphabet of desire out of that. So he would put all these intentions out, and then that created an alphabet.
Yeah. So he's like beyond just an artist. Like he's just like this Renaissance man. Just I don't know what to call him, but he's like what's like an entrepreneur, but like for the brain, like
I guess Renaissance man is a good way of putting that. Yeah, because he kind of is. Because the other thing is the idea of chaos magic. You do all of these things and then you throw it away.
Right.
Because right now it's in your conscious. You did it. It's on your conscious. Throw it away. Get it out of your conscious. Push it back to your subconscious. Right. And then it'll come back through.
Right.
In its own way. So he kind of is like very above his time. Well, it's around this time that he has a show and he meets the man himself.
Aleister Crowley.
The great
there we
beast
go.
666. He
There
meets
we
Crowley.
Go.
If you guys don't know who Crowley is, look him up. I'm not going to give you that much background information on him, except for do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's all I will say. Yes. Crowley and him meet at a gallery where he's having an exhibition. He's only 17, remember this.
Damn.
So the great Crowley is there, and he loves Austin Spare.
Of course, yeah.
He loves him. He tells him that he thinks that they're both messengers of the divine, that they're like twin spirits, basically. Yeah. This is after he left the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, so he had already founded Thelema at this point and already written the Book of the Law. So this is the point in Crowley's life where he does this. The critics see Spare's work at the show and they say it's abnormal, it's horrible, it's morbid, and Crowley's like, I fucking love it.
You don't get it.
You don't get it. You're not magical and divine like we are. So Crowley brings him into the fold. He gets him to join his new secret society, which is Argentum Astrum, which means the Silver Star. And this is the Thelemites is who it is. Okay. So he joins them. And in taking that, he takes the oath and he renames himself with his magical name because even though they say Crowley is left-hand magic, for some reason he's all about rituals and all the fucking nonsense. So to me, he's very right-hand magic. He's just kind of an asshole. Yeah. But he takes the magical name Yehoveam, which I think is a mix between Jehovah and Om, like the mantra that you say in yoga. Yeah. So it's a mix of those two things. Crowley becomes obsessed with Austin Spare. Yeah. He starts sending him letters and poems because Crowley is a poet. I don't know if you've ever read his poetry.
No, I'd be scared to, honestly. Yeah.
Don't.
Do you think he's homosexual?
Crowley is.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so.
So he like loves him affectionately.
Yeah, Crowley is openly bisexual.
Right.
But I think he might just be homosexual and
just at the time.
It was of the time. Yeah. I think that's kind of what it is. He even sends him a copy of a poem he wrote about fucking Victor Nuremberg, who was like his assistant. Oh, so he sends him that poem. And then he sends him a different poem called The Twins that is like blatantly homosexual and clearly written for Spare. So I think like he had a pretty big crush on Austin Spare. I mean, this little 17-year-old Twinkie boy. Yeah. You're into it, right?
And was Austin Spare, was he straight?
So that's a tough one. Yeah. So this is a weird time in history too. So Crowley's one of those people also that invokes God form. Yeah. Which is weird, but that'll come back to it. Austin Spare turns Crowley down. I'm in the camp that doesn't believe that Austin Spare is gay. Okay. Just everything points to the fact that he isn't. Right. I'll get into it a little bit later on, but he turns Crowley down like hard. Okay. And he actually ends up hating Crowley. Oh. Not long after they met. They end up like, I don't know if Crowley ever hated him, but he hated the rigid formality of everything that Crowley was doing. He was against that entirely. So he hated being in the AA. He didn't like the organization. For sure. Before they split up, Crowley gets him to do some illustrations for the periodical, The Equinox, that Crowley puts out. And I looked this up. It started in 1909 with Crowley. Thelema still puts this out. Oh, like it's still currently going, I think, which is kind of crazy. The funniest thing is they paid him in a ceremonial robe. So I don't know if that's when their relationship started to sour. That Austin Spare was like a fucking robe. Jesus Christ. Also, like if he hates all the religious part of like do the ceremony shit, then why does he want to get paid in a robe?
Seriously. I mean, I do like robes.
I mean, Monarey's really into robes. You can definitely pay her in a robe.
But the boy needs some money. Yeah.
Well, anyways, when he gets, I don't know if he got kicked out or if he left, but Crowley writes on his oath practitioner sheet that Austin Spare is an artist and can't understand organization, otherwise he would have passed. I took such a dislike towards that because I hate organization. Yeah. And I'm an artist. And I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah, you're like, I could do both. And like, look at you organize this whole entire thing.
I mean, yeah.
You could do it.
If you're motivated about something, sure, you know? Well, also, this is part of the reason why I don't think that Austin Spare is gay, is when he saw Crowley made up in Piccadilly, which Piccadilly is like a term for a certain area of London that had like a circus, but it kind of just means like male prostitute, like flamboyant garb. Austin Spare is quoted when he saw Crowley dressed up this way that he said, "My God, if I had to go to all that effort to attract him, I'd give up the ghost." Meaning like Crowley's so ugly he can't get men, and he has to go to all this extra length to try to get boys. And I think that's a hilarious straight man's attitude about it, to be like, this guy is so over the top.
Damn.
But he's also quoted in saying, when talking about Thelema, I'm going to quote this exactly because it's in British, so it's funny, "Whose insincerity is their safety, they are but the unemployed dandies of the brothel."
Whose insincerity is their safety? They are the unemployed dandies of the brothels. I don't know if I get it. Explain it to me.
He's basically saying like these losers are unemployed sex addict.
Got it. Okay.
And they're insincere, and by doing so, they think it makes them cool.
Oh, their insincerity is their safety. Like that's
what makes them like the cool, like it crowd.
Right.
You know, that like, oh, they're so cool.
Right.
And this is I took actual pictures of like Thelema at the time, so you could see what they're doing is like dressing up and doing plays. Essentially.
Yeah, because people like make it seem like Aleister Crowley is like, oh God, he's like this so master.
Evil.
Yeah, and you're like, he's just a dork.
Like, he's a dork who dressed up in robes, and he was into scat play, I'm pretty sure, which is like, there's nothing cool about Crowley.
He's just a gay dork,
get it.
An unattractive gay dork who like couldn't get dick. And he was like, well, I guess if I try to tell people that I'm like this really powerful, divine, wizard,
then they'll hang out with me. Yeah. And I think he was very well read, which is how he initially attracts people.
For sure.
And then it just, yeah. Oh, I have so many good quotes. I forgot this is another quote. "Self-condemned in their disgusting fatness, their emptiness of power, without even the magic of personal charm or beauty. They are offensive in their bad taste and mongering for advertisement."
Wow. See, that makes me feel like he is gay, because I was like, the way that he's petty.
Sassy. Sassy boy.
Yeah.
I also think, though, in that last part, that kind of describes the comedy scene, too.
Totally.
Like, are you mongering for advertisement? A lot of people are.
Absolutely.
Like, you're not having fun. You would be personally charming if you were.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. It's you're like, oh, you're just trying to fill this hole, and you think that if all these people give you validation, or if people give you compliments, or if you just have a lot of followers, then that must mean that you're good. But it's like, even a lot of people who like reach those certain successes, they're still going to be unsatisfied, because then they don't have the respect. And at the end of the day, that's what you really want, is the respect. And that's something that you just, people will give it to you or they won't.
Yeah. And we were talking about this earlier, the idea of like personal charm. Like, I want to hang out with you. If you're not fun to hang out with, I'm not going to want to hang out with you
for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
for all the days that I have left to live, I want you to be a part of none of it.
Yeah, memento mori, guys.
Yeah,
memento mori.
I'm going to start carrying around skulls. I'm like, do you get it? This is how I want you.
Do you fucking get it?
You get it?
Yeah. Well, back to what you were saying. Some people, I've noticed this is like almost a push. Some people want to include him in the homosexual scene of London. They want to say like he's a queer icon. Spare. I don't really see it, because the only time that he's ever talked about any sort of like homosexuality that I could find was when he brags about having sex with a hermaphrodite, which at the time is not the same thing as like a trans person. Right. At the time, that means like a medically born. Yeah,
you have both
things. Yeah. It's a different thing back then than like what we think of now in current society.
Right.
And he also bragged about having sex with a dwarf. And so, as I said earlier, he has
I'm thinking of an elf. I was like, there's no dwarfs.
Someone with dwarfism, like a little person.
Okay.
These are just his words. That's why I'm saying it like that. But also, like I said, he's been known to tell little white lies.
Right.
So there's no way to know if either of these things are even true. But if they are true, he constantly talks about how he sought out like the abnormal experiences and parts of life, which means that he's talking about those things as if they're like a freak show. Which is not the same thing as being a part of the LGBT community. Right. In fact, it's like
the opposite. Yeah.
It's like not an ally.
Like, these people are so fucking crazy and weird. Ew.
And ew, I'm into it because I'm into things that are abnormal, and that makes me edgy. You know?
Right.
So it's kind of the exact opposite of that. So he may have been bisexual. I don't really see the evidence of it. And that in itself makes me think definitely no.
Right.
And the falling out with Crowley, where it seems like maybe Crowley made some passes at him and he was like, fuck you, bro.
Uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the sassy talk. He's British.
Totally. Yeah. And he's just like a smart
he's
man.
He's Victorian British. So I think he's
sure.
just a sassy talker. There is this other thing, though, about the hermaphrodite that could be what this maybe has more to do with, because hermaphrodites are a theme in art. And I mean like an ancient theme in art. Yeah. Like this image here is the famous Hermaphrodites, which is actually an ancient Roman sculpture. And they found it, like they dug it up. It's probably a copy from a Greek.
Yeah.
And the idea is you walk up behind it, and when you walk up, it's a lying woman there. And as you cross around to the other side, she's got a dick.
Yeah.
So it's this sort of thing where it's like they were considered like in the world of gods, because Hermaphrodites, the god, is a mix of Hermes and Aphrodite. Yeah, those are his parents, where he gets the name from. And the story is actually that he and his lover become one. And that's what that is. So it could be that he's talking about hermaphrodites because it's like magical and art, and he's so educated in the art world.
For sure. Sorry, I just saw Wizard Wars.
Well, yeah, because I wanted to remind myself that if no one has ever heard about like the Alister Crowley Wizard Wars with what's his name? I can't think of it. When he got kicked out of the other order. Anyways, it's very, very funny. So I was reminding myself if you guys haven't looked up how silly wizards of the Victorian era are, look it up. It's great. You're going to love it. Right around this time, he meets a woman in a pub. Austin Spare does, who is looking for a husband for her daughter, who already has a kid out of wedlock. So at Victorian era, it's just like,
this is different. Yeah. Okay, I'll marry her.
And he falls in love with this woman, like truly falls in love with this woman, which is another reason why he could be bisexual, but he's probably just straight. Right. This is a drawing he gave to her. It's her in the middle with Austin Spare all around her, encompassing
he's
her.
A little needy.
It's a little needy. She is a little bit older than him, so he's very obsessed with her.
Okay.
They did have sort of a rough relationship, but I think that's just because he was a rough relationship to be in.
Yeah.
He seems like a very interesting character, but his career's chugging along at this point. Like he's doing fine, right? And then he puts out the Pleasure and Obsessions exhibition. And this one is when he starts to lose a little bit of steam. It was less attended than the others. Okay. And he blamed it on the fact that they didn't send out flyers. But really, it probably had more to do with the fact that the Titanic sank 2 days before the opening. What's so a big deal?
Hey, a bunch of people just died on a boat.
No one cares about your art.
Yeah.
Also, I was thinking about this because someone had a bit about how everyone's going to blame COVID for not like for their careers not taking off. Like, well, I was going to, but then COVID. But I feel like Titanic was that for the Victorian era.
So good. Yeah.
It's like hey. My career, I guess not Victorian era, but the early 20th century of like, I was going to do something with my life, but then the Titanic.
The fucking iceberg, you know how that goes.
I think that's what it was. But he didn't use that as an excuse.
Yeah,
he said,
so good for him.
Good for him. He never really seems to make excuses. He is kind of a stand-up guy in that.
Yeah.
But in 1913, he publishes the Book of Pleasure. This is the whole title. The Book of Pleasure, Self-Love, The Psychology of Ecstasy.
Ooh.
Which sounds like masturbating.
Yeah. Sounds
kind of like you're jacking
fucking
off.
Themselves. Yeah.
Right? A little bit. In this, he creates his entire own religion. So it has to do with Kia. The meaning is that, what was it? The devourer of religions, the meaning of absolute freedom, freedom from your potential to manifest things, from your ego to perceive things, from believing in things. It's like the freedom from having to be tied down to any constraint of anything, really, is what Kia is. I heard other people compare it to similar to like the idea of the Tao,
right?
If you've ever heard of that, or like the unmodified I. Yeah. I think in Hinduism there's a term called like neti neti, which means like neither, and he was obsessed with this idea.
Got it.
Of being like neither Christian nor a Satanist,
right?
Like don't prescribe anything on to me, sort of
for
thing.
Sure.
I'm neither.
Yeah.
So these are images from that book where you can see there's a lot of sigil stuff going on.
Yeah.
I think this is also the first time that we see Zos. I believe it's pronounced Zos. And not Zos. I think it's Zos.
Okay.
Because I want to say it like Zos.
Zos. Yeah.
Well, maybe not with that.
Yeah,
one.
I was like, I don't know if that was close, and I like caught myself. I was like, no. There's no.
Her last name is Martinez.
Okay.
It's probably that Esos is his name, Austin Osman Spare.
Yeah.
And it's probably just that he switched out the A for a Z.
Right.
Because Z's are not as popular in the English language. So
and it represents the full spectrum from A to Z. So he's like, oh, I am everything. It's like all encompassing or something.
Everything and nothing, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely coming into that. So Kia and Zos, those are important things to remember. He goes hard on this idea of the neither. This man implies woman and hermaphrodite implies eunuch, but he believes in neither of those things. So this is the reason why people want so badly to say that he's like a non-binary person.
Got it.
But I guess in some senses he is, but in other senses he isn't. You know? Self-love is a mental state. He describes it as being like the principle that allows your ego to appreciate the world, I guess. And basically it's the acceptance of everything.
Yeah.
Is a good way to put that, right?
Yeah, I like this dude. I like
not through controlling forces. He has this weird thing about control.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't like being controlled. He doesn't want to control anyone else. That's really
he's
his
like the first
thing.
person who's like, hey, labels are bad. Like whether it's like I'm a vegan or I'm a Christian or I'm a middle. It's like, no, like you're just a spirit and this is just a physical body. And it's nice to sometimes identify as those things to try to like, you know, recognize people or certain things as patterns. But it's like if you only like operate in those, you know, in that confined space, then we go to war.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
Also, why are you letting other people define you?
For sure.
That he hates that. That's like absolutely against that. He hates it. So sigils, as I talked about earlier, it's kind of like a Kabbalistic idea. It's like an astral sign traced onto what's called a kamea or like a magic square. Have you seen these before?
No.
So sometimes it seems like they're using what's the word I'm looking for? Well, you can see them up there. They look like Sudoku.
Yeah.
They're not. They're not, but they kind of do. But then they also have like Hebrew symbols in them because they're Kabbalistic, you know?
Okay.
And then you can use the Hebrew symbols and make sigils out of it, basically. But he really breaks off of this entire idea and goes full left hand.
Yeah.
Where he thinks that symbols are too conscious and he wants to go fully unconscious.
Yeah.
So he also rejects iconography. So anything that looks like a thing that you recognize, you know, like emojis. He's not into anything like, so he's starting to kind of distance himself from that sort of stuff. He wants fully loose forms of things, right? And he completely, at this point, rejects anything formal like robes, candles, group ceremonies, invoking God
rules
form.
Or like anything rigid.
Any of those rules. He's not about it.
Got it.
At this point, he starts automatic drawing is a term that he comes up with. So you clear your mind entirely and you start to scribble. And through this, you channel your unconscious. And a dream pours out of you. And it's almost the exact opposite of sigil magic, where you're putting an intention into something.
Right.
Instead, you're just letting it fully flow, and then whatever happens, happens, right?
Right.
So he's quoted as saying, bad art arises when a law, code, or mannerism does not allow spontaneity.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. Because I've heard of automatic like channeling or like writing, and I try to like do that, but I'm like, I didn't know that like, oh, this is like where this like comes from. That's really cool.
He is the grandfather of all of this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we know about that we don't know Austin Spare. He's the one who did all this.
Yeah.
So so basically he wants you to exhaust your mind. And he talks about that because it's easier to achieve unconscious once you're exhausted. So whether that means, it's funny because he talks about like yoga poses and breathing, but he also talks about like drinking and having sex, like anything that makes you really like unconscious.
Loose, yeah.
But
I really loved that quote of like bad art arises when whatever that was, like when law, code, or mannerism doesn't allow spontaneity. It's like, yeah, man.
Yep.
Like,
and we see that a lot going on now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Everything he said 100 years ago perfectly applies to today.
Totally.
In 1914, he has his first one-man show, and it leads him to get on this publication called Form that he starts with another guy in 1916. And they only put out 2 publications, but the drawings from this are beautiful. Actually, this is another thing. If any rich person wants to buy me this first edition. I mean, they're really incredible. There's something else, 1914, first man show, 1916. These years might be coming up in people's head because 1914 is World War I.
Yeah, I was like,
and this is Britain.
Yeah.
So they are in it.
Yeah.
And you can see the image on there, the interesting use of the word Holocaust, which is fascinating because we apply Holocaust to mean in the Second World War what happened to the Jewish population of Europe. Yeah. But Holocaust is actually a Greek word, which means to sacrifice through fire to the gods. Oh. And so I think his application of this, because you see those weird figures. That. Yeah, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
The Jews took it, which it makes sense why they did. But the application is interesting because in World War I, for these people seeing the first modern battlefield, if you guys like history, anyone watching this, Dan Carlin's Blueprint for Armageddon. Listen to that, all about World War I. It is fascinating because the First World War is crazy with what they did as far as like modern technology meets cavalry. Like it's people riding on horses being blown up by modern technology, machine guns. I mean, it's chemical warfare. It's nuts.
Yeah.
So in 1918, he is conscripted into the military. And he has his first experience at war. Yeah. He was shipped to North Africa and Egypt. And while he was there, he studied hieroglyphs and supposedly spent a night in no man's land. He was also on a ship that was struck by a torpedo, which is like, this is the craziest experiences of World War I. And that's because
can't I just get shot at and not have fucking torpedoes? And
yeah. And the craziest part is I think they're all lies. I don't think any of that is true.
He's like, then I got struck by lightning. He's like, then I was possessed, and then I beat a demon. You're just like, damn, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I read this whole thing about it, and then the next thing was like, none of that happened. He was stationed in Blackpool, which is in the UK.
He was in the office. He wasn't ever on battle. He literally was like doing administrative work, and you're like, this
sincerely, I think he was giving people vaccines for tetanus because there was barbed wire. No man's land is full of barbed wire.
Yeah.
And so everyone had to have the tetanus shot because otherwise you would just die.
Yeah.
Get locked on, die. So, but the one thing that is true is he at some point became a war painter, an official war artist is what they're called. So he did see the front lines, but not in battle. He went after the battle would be over. He would go out and paint scenes from it.
Damn.
So these are some images of that. And they are really striking images. I mean, they're really beautiful and they're really important to document history in that way. But it is silly that he had this whole, he went to Egypt and studied hieroglyphs. Oh, in the middle of the war? Did you do that?
Did you? Yeah.
Did you do that, buddy? Okay.
They're like, oh, hey, do you want to take a detour from trying to kill us? Here, let us like show you all our most precious art.
Yeah, let me go over here and make some sketches of these hieroglyphs to take back to England with me. So that's where we're going to leave off for part 1 of Austin Spare.
Okay, well, I love him and I'm going to look him up because I'm happy you showed me him because I'm like, yeah, there's so many interesting things that I feel like are common in like, you know, new age rituals or whatever that you had no idea like came from an artist. And it's funny because one of my favorite birthday presents that anyone ever got me, my ex-boyfriend who I had anything, I shouldn't say anything. But he got me a tarot deck and it's a Salvador Dali like tarot deck and it's just so beautiful and I guess Salvador Dali, I don't know enough, but he started to get into like the occult and like esoteric like teachings or like learnings or whatever, and so he was like, oh, I want to make this tarot deck and it's fucking stunning. And
hey, well, guess what? He's going to be in the next episode.
Oh,
Dolly's in the next episode. Yeah, you'll see when you come back. Actually, don't look up anything about Austin
maybe I'll
Spare.
Bring my tarot, the Salvador Dali tarot.
You should bring that next time. Yeah,
it's in storage, but if I go to my storage before, I'll get it.
Yeah,
for
you
sure.
should bring that for sure. There's going to be a lot more in episode 2.
Yeah,
and I'm having you back on for that, so we're going to do a little bit more. But
there will be no other woman.
There will be no other. There will be no other witch on this podcast.
There will be none. Okay, that's my man.
Yeah. So thank you guys for watching this and come back and learn more about Austin Spare.
Yeah.